We have two speakers for you this evening. On my left, our guest speaker is Dr. Eamonn Butler from the Adam Smith Institute, which is an independent and influential think tank, very much at the cutting edge of the debates on privatisation, deregulation. He's going to be speaking first, and he's going to be defending capitalism. On my right, from the Socialist Party of Great Britain, we have Richard Headicar. Richard, again, will be speaking for about 20-25 minutes, and he will be defending socialism. Oh, right. Well, that's a slick answer. Okay, we will, the running order that we're going to be using tonight, Dr. Butler will speak for 20-25 minutes, Richard will speak for 20-25 minutes, then Dr. Butler will again have 10 minutes to respond, and Richard will follow up with a further 10 minutes. When that's complete, we will then take questions and comments on the floor. In conformance with the traditions of the party, we will take visitors first, so any party members, if you will, hold back, and I will indicate when I'm willing to take questions from members. After that, we'll wind that up about 9:20, and then the two speakers will again have 10 minutes each to sum up, and I will bring the proceedings to a close quite firmly at 9:45, because the management have actually asked us to vacate the building by 10 o'clock. We need 10 minutes, 15 minutes just to finish off. So that's the order of the day, and I will say no more, but I will hand over to Dr. Butler.
Thank you very much. Well, I've been asked to speak for 20 minutes, and thanks to the capitalist economy, you can get little gadgets that tell you exactly how long you're speaking for. It's one of the reasons I love the market economy. Firstly, let me thank you very much for inviting me here. I've always been, from a distance, a sort of fan of the Socialist Party, because of your stand, really, I think, against the heavy-handed, bureaucratic forms of socialism and authoritarianism. And it's always struck me that you are genuinely interested in ideas and arguments. And it's called a debate. I think probably the vote at the end will be 51-1 or something like that. And I'm not sure we're going to change each other's minds. But at least I hope that I might understand a little bit more of your thinking, and I hope that if I have any skill at all, perhaps I can introduce you to a few of our arguments. But I'm actually here, I'm in fact a complete fraud, because I always thought of myself actually as something that's socialist. That I am very much against privilege and class and wide disparity in income and wealth. And I think that, like Adam Smith, the reason that I believe in a market capitalist economy is because I think it is the best way of helping fundamentally the working poor. I think that if you look at the way that capitalism is spread through the world, it is the people at the very bottom who have benefited most from it, and those actually are the people that I'm interested in. I'm not in this for the boss classes. I'm not in it because I went to a private school, I didn't, or I had a silver spoon background because I didn't, or even that, you know, I think that I'm going to become a billionaire and boss everybody else around because I know I'm not. You can't do that in the sort of think tank business. So I think that we will find that our ideals are actually quite similar. It is just, I think, the means that we probably disagree on. So I welcome this opportunity. I think I'm going to make, if I've got time, I'll make 4 points. Firstly, I think that a system, a socialist system, which involves people voting as to how society should proceed and what it should do, I don't think that is any better than the profit system. I think it's open to the same kinds of human frailties. Secondly, I would like to argue that the exchange system, which is fundamental to capitalism, the system of exchange for profit, benefits both sides. It benefits everybody. It doesn't just benefit some minority of providers who reap a financial profit. It's much broader than that. Thirdly, I'd like to say that the market system is better at dealing with change. We live in a world of change. We're talking about climate change and goodness knows what else. Things do change. And I think that one of the reasons I support the capitalist system is because I think that it deals with that very much better. And the fourth thing, if I have time, is simply to say that the system that I'm arguing for does actually seem to work, and I think that it works better. So on the first point about how you actually decide what is going to be done, well, you've got two possible systems. We'll sit down and we vote and we decide what's going to happen. Or we have a system which is driven by trade and commerce and indeed by profit. Well, it seems to me that the vote motive is just as corrupt, if you like, as the profit motive. In political society, I was just reading the headlines today in the Evening Standard, MPs have to pay back £1 million or something. It's a corrosive system. People enter it because they want power. Yes, I know you're all good people and you would like to have a system where good people come in and decide how society is going to be run. But what happens is, of course, that power attracts people who don't think that at all. People who are in it for themselves. I've just come back the other day from Moscow, and really the people in public office there seem to think, politicians as well, seem to think that the reason that they're in public office is to line their own pockets, and not to actually help society. The whole thing is corrupt. And I think that if you have a market economy, you actually undermine that corruption, that power motive. I think it gives people an alternative. If everything is decided by some Politburo, well, we don't have any options. But MPs can decide what they want, but in a market economy, actually it's ordinary individuals who decide lots of other things for themselves. So it's a balance of power, which I think is important. I'm against concentrated power. I think it's wicked and evil. I want to see restraints on people's power. And I think that the market economy actually gives a lot of power to ordinary people rather than to big fat cats or powerful politicians. Because it's driven by people's choices. It's what you and I decide to buy that decides what's actually going to be produced. And if we don't buy things, then they don't get produced because there's no profit in it. So I think that the vote system is no better in human terms than the profit system. And I think it's probably actually slightly worse because of that concentration of power. Secondly, I want to explain how I see the system of exchange for profit. Exchange makes people better off. They wouldn't do it if they didn't feel that they were better off. It makes both sides better off. We get confused in an economy where we have money because we think, oh well, whoever's getting the cash is better off. But cash is just a medium of exchange. It's just something that you accept temporarily because you know that you can use it to exchange for something that you really want later. It's only a medium. So I think you should look beyond financial benefit. Exchange is one of the most natural things in the world. Kids this high will swap toys, right? You get fed up with a toy, you get another kid, and you swap the toy, you're better off, and the other kid's better off. Both of you have benefited from the exchange. And you wouldn't do it if you didn't benefit from the exchange. Now, when you've got that happening all over the place, millions of people, billions of people indeed around the planet, all exchanging, all benefiting from it, all getting something they want, that they prefer, and giving up something that they don't want quite so much, but that somebody else does want, that spreads benefit throughout the planet. It doesn't matter whether money is involved or not. Both sides benefit from that deal, and they gain something which they value. This system also, it benefits, it spreads benefits, human benefits far and wide and very fast as well. It encourages people, of course, to grow their capital, to husband their resources, to create capital which can produce goods and indeed services more cheaply and more effectively at a higher standard. It encourages those motives. And I think, therefore, it's given the world better and cheaper products. Therefore, I think it's to be supported. The third argument I want to make is that I think the market system, the capitalist system, is more adroit than one which depends on political planning or votes on how we should do things. Again, we live in a world of constant change. Things happen all the time. Stuff just happens. And in the market economy, it is prices which steer resources, and they do that very rapidly, very quickly. They do it in response to what's happening in local places, just from time to time, from minute to minute. You can think of something like, I don't know, an estate agent or a taxi firm. An estate agent has to know what the supply and demand of different properties are in the locality, not just from 5-year plan to 5-year plan, or even from year to year, or even from month to month, but from week to week and day to day. They've got to know what properties people want to buy and what properties are coming on sale, and the other local problems, like whether there's going to be a road or a planning blight or whatever. They've got to know that. A taxi company has to know where passengers are and what they'll pay and where they want to go, not just from day to day, but from minute to minute. The market system, capitalist system, is incredibly rapid at dealing with changes like that. Circumstances, it can deal with those and make sure that the goods or the services are provided at the right place at the right time. By the time, if we tried to do this by some sort of central planning system, and we had a computer up in Whitehall or something, and you were an estate agent and you had to feed all your information up to Whitehall, and then it all got number crunched up there and it all came back down again. By the time they'd done that, the customers would have gone. I mean, they'd have gone abroad or they bought something somewhere else. They were, and your taxi customers would certainly have gone. But you can't possibly process the information that you need to satisfy people's changing needs and desires by having a central planning system. It's an information problem. And of course you've got to remember that information isn't cut and dried. Information exists there, it exists in people's mind. It's partial, it's local, it's changing. There may even be disagreements about what the information actually is, what is actually happening. And the market system works that out with amazing alacrity and speed, and much more so, I think, than you can get from a central planning system. So there we are. I think that it's. I think the system doesn't rely on concentrated power. I think that exchange leaves both sides better off. I believe that the market handles information much better. And I think also the fourth point that I would like to make is that I do think it works. Now, I know that when we're discussing this subject, it's very important that we should talk either about theory or about reality. And I'm prepared to discuss either of those. What I'm not prepared to do is to compare, your theory with my reality, and vice versa. I think we can say, right, let's look at capitalist societies, America, Britain, New Zealand, Australia, wherever you like. Are they better societies than socialism has produced over the years? And I think, when you do actually look around the world, I think they are better societies, and they have done much better for the ordinary individuals, and particularly the individuals at the bottom end. So I think on a practical level, I'm very happy to argue that, and I think that capitalism has actually benefited the world hugely. But at the same time, I do believe that it has these theoretical benefits, advantages, which I've been talking about. So we can discuss either, but you can't compare somebody's sort of perfect idea of what a society should be, mine or yours, with how it actually turns out, because these things always get corrupted by politics and culture and who knows what. But it does seem to me that one of the reasons, and one of the strongest reasons, I think, to support a capitalist system is that in recent years, in the last, 30 years, I mean, it's taken how many billion people out of poverty, out of abject poverty? It is their integration into the market economy, into the world trade system, which has improved the lives of 1 billion people in India and 500 million people, going on 1 billion when they get around to finishing it, in China. It wasn't socialism, it wasn't Mao that produced that, it wasn't Indian socialism that did that. In fact, that held them back. But just in recent years, and certainly since the Berlin Wall came down, just in those recent years, billions of people have moved up from $1 a day. Now, I think that's actually a good thing, and I think we need to have more of it. And I think this is a powerful engine of growth and human benefit, which we should actually all appreciate. The world's living standards have doubled since 1970. I think that's a good thing. I like to see people living better than they did last year and the year before, and better than my granny did. And we live at a standard today, we take it for granted. We live at a standard which a medieval prince or princess would have dreamed of. But we take things for granted, hot and cold running water and all the rest. And it is the capitalist system which has produced all of those things. It is the capitalist system which has given us the wealth to look after our poor, to create welfare systems. I think that it's a very positive human system, and I don't think you should knock it. So I think that's really, I won't go on any further, because I think I've covered the main arguments, we can come back to them later. But I think it's a system that works. I think it works better. I think if you look around the world of capitalist and socialist societies, I think it's clear that it works better. But I think also, on a theoretical level, I think that it captures human motives better. I think the exchange system, the desire of every person to better their condition and to do it through exchange and by building up their capital and producing better and cheaper goods, these are things to be encouraged. And I think that it is more adroit at dealing with change, and that's really the reason why I believe in it.
Just one moment, and we'll move straight on.
To say yourself. I have to say, if I was in his position, that would have been my role. I would have asked as many questions as I could. Prior to this meeting, there was quite a lot of discussion on the internet about what is capitalism. And there were contributions from free marketeers, from the Keynesians, from the monetarists. So I thought I'd start with a couple of definitions from the Oxford Dictionary, which might please us all and it might not. It says of capitalism, an economic system in which the production and distribution of goods depend on invested private capital and production for profit. Secondly, it says the dominance of private owners over capital and production profit. In Chambers, it says, rather succinctly, my favourite dictionary, a capitalist is one who derives income and power from capital. And capitalism, it says, the economic system that generates and gives power to capitalists. That's very important. It even says state capitalism, a system of control, state control, and use of capital. I think that's what Eamonn was confused with socialism. For the purpose of this debate, the alleged differences between the definitions of capitalism are totally irrelevant, because socialists consider all of them ruthlessly exploitative and totally undesirable. Theoretical refinements of a corrupt and oppressive system. What socialists propose is a world without markets, without money, without wages, without state or leaders, a truly classless society. The Oxford Dictionary says of us, a political and economic theory of social organisation which advocates the means of production, distribution and exchange should be regulated or owned by the whole community. If you remove the word exchange and substitute and for or, it gives us a reasonable starting point. Owned by the community as a whole, what a lovely phrase. It describes the very basis of socialism. Our term for it is common ownership and is the core to our case. The idea is anathema to capitalists, and their usual response is to dismiss it, a little as Eamonn did slightly, as hopelessly impractical, or at best the fanciful notion of naive dreamers at worst. Actually, I have worse than that said, but never mind about that. Yet for our distant ancestors, producing and sharing together was a normal way of life. Why on earth is it considered practical, sensible, or reasonable that our common inheritances, land, minerals, crops, the bountiful produce of nature, and all the resources of the earth should all be hijacked in the interest of privileged minorities? Is it practical, sensible, or reasonable that light, warmth, food, water, medicines, and shelter produced from these resources, the basic necessities of life, the things we all need to survive, or desire to make life more pleasurable, are produced primarily, and some might say only, for profit? And that in order to make that profit, the vast majority of those inhabiting our planet must needs be exploited, often degraded, frequently cheated, and alas, sometimes literally worked to death. Is it practical, sensible, or reasonable that as a direct consequence of the profit motive, so-called surplus food and crops are destroyed, life-saving medicines and vitamins are deliberately underproduced, or that every empty home in London should be boarded up and left unoccupied? It's not right, is it? It isn't practical or reasonable or sensible. Nor is it practical, reasonable or sensible that millions of unconsidered human beings should be left to live or die in misery and squalor, while others prosper. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and other major catastrophes never fail to elicit a generous and warm response from people all the world over. But routine tragedies, terrible sufferings, every day, every moment that we live, affect far more people than those catastrophes, and they remain unnoticed. But that, I'm afraid, is the harsh reality of good old, oh so practical and efficient capitalism. Astonishingly, a system still resignedly accepted by the very people struggling within it, trapped by an assiduously reinforced mindset of a seriously flawed assumption. Common ownership is common sense, and the only possible foundation for another fundamental principle of socialism, that production should be only for use and not profit. The plain fact is that whatever the theoretical differences between the various key players on the monopoly board of capitalism, profit is the medium that binds them all together. The theoretical evos. The vigorous pursuit of profit is sometimes considered to be both necessary and desirable and even virtuous by capitalists. Maximising profits means that 10 times as many workers are employed in selling rather than producing. And production for profit leads to gross waste and inefficient use of resources, and it also makes people ill. A virulent disease, far more widespread and deadly than swine flu, is the profit imperative panic syndrome. Middle managers and above, in both private and public services, are particularly susceptible to it. Under pressure from their bosses to produce an annual profit, or at least a drastically reduced loss, while increasingly constrained by ever-diminishing budgets, they opt to work beyond their agreed hours without pay. What Upton Sinclair called giving the bosses time for the church. Last year, 5 million employees worked 7 hours a week for nothing. Calculated as a £27 billion gift to the employers, far exceeding the so-called strikes. Work-related stress, this is a fact, is the third leading cause of death in young men. Why should we be surprised? Long hours, low wages, no security. Even a permanent contract may only be 6 months. A change of ownership under the Thatcher legislation frequently results in a revised, almost invariably worse condition of employment and lower pay. 6-month contract, 40-year mortgage, job insecurity, mounting debts. It's not rocket science, is it? Why people get stressed. The earliest example of writing, which was discovered in Babylon, was about debt, believe it or not. And in 1996, Lifetime Television received the Cable Ace Award for the best game show ever. It was called Debt. And it was completely humiliating. I'm not going to tell you how, it's too sad, but if you want to know afterwards, I'll describe it to you. The profit imperative panic syndrome encourages exactly the kind of reckless behaviour we've recently seen from the banks. Though how institutions that charge £35 for a letter, £40 for a represented cheque, that charges interest on charges, charges you for paying in, and charging you for taking money out, could ever make a loss is a miracle of itself. Some years ago, I discovered a single UK bank spent more than £3 million on paper alone. More recently, I had occasion, very rarely I assure you, to visit a bank, to change an address. It took a computer only 5 seconds to print out 3 forms in paper for me to fill in. Ridiculous. Businesses are adopting increasingly crazy ideas in their attempts to cut running costs. A favourite one at the moment is saving labour costs by sacking workers who perform their jobs well and replacing them at much lower wages by those who cannot do them at all. Inefficiency in the harnessing of resources, appalling waste, environmental damage and callousness, and uncaring attitudes of so many workers. The real producers, the workers, are all consequences of producing for profit. But as long as money brings with it power and privilege to those individuals and conglomerates who elect to exploit others, as it invariably does, millions of human beings will remain shackled to poverty, hunger, and misery. That is why a socialist society must be a moneyless society. And even people who are receptive to propositions of common ownership and production for use find the idea of the absence of money difficult to assimilate. Most consider money a constant, an ever-present, a necessity that is an indispensable fact of life. A perfectly understandable response, given the confined and so carefully constructed and preserved parameters in which the most discussion about it occurs. In their publication, Looking to the Millennium, the Earth Centre predicted 3 things that would abide: man, nature, and money. Obviously, it is not possible simply to decide to abolish money as an isolated act. Its demise would be a byproduct of socialism, the logical consequence of common ownership and production for use. We should not be shocked that the Earth Centre included money as a component of its Holy Trinity, for it's an all-pervasive, relentlessly intrusive, often overwhelming reality from our toys onwards. And I'm not sure that when I exchanged toys, I was always better off than the cut-artists who did it with me. The corrupting nature of that reality was succinctly stated by the American writer Logan Pearson Smith, who wrote, "Those who set out to serve God and man soon realize that there is no God." In a world with a fantastic productive capacity and astonishing technological advances, millions are denied the most basic provision simply for lack of money. Now, only a blinkered nincompoop would deny that the productive and technological development that resulted from industrial capitalism, albeit at a profound cost for humans, was not helpful in reaching our present position. Indeed, these developments are precisely what made the worldwide cooperation and possible. Today we can communicate anywhere. Before industrial development took us to this point, perhaps socialism was a dream. But now, internationally, we can communicate, we can cooperate, and we've seen that cooperation in so many instances where there have been disasters. At the same time, market economics and the dominant role of money have perpetuated the separation, widened the division between the haves and the have-nots. Only last week, we heard that the gap between those who have and those who don't have in this country is wider than it's ever been since the Second World War. In some cases, that difference is so great that it is difficult to grasp without a graphic illustration. Now, some of you here will know what my favourite one is. It concerns the Duke of Westminster. And I swear I'm never going to use it again, but I'm going to use it tonight because it's worth hearing. It still staggers me every time I hear it. I've nothing against the Duke of Westminster. By all accounts, he's a very nice bloke. He paid his workers poll tax, and he drinks good whiskey like I do. I've nothing against him, although his whiskey isn't better than mine for his money. But when he was 29 in the 70s, he inherited his family wealth. 29. Now at that time, there was a steelworkers strike, and the Daily Telegraph described them as so-called low-paid steelworkers at £100 a week. Well, of course, the truth was, to get £100 a week, they had to work this time for the church in order to boost their wages. But anyway, assuming that it was £100 a week, I'm indebted to the late, very funny Keith Waterhouse for pointing this out in the first place. which I verified on my computer. For steel workers at £100 a week to have earned the 29-year-old Duke of Westminster's inheritance, they would have had to start work 25,000 years before. Oh, no, wait, I'm not finished. 25,000 years before the emergence of Neanderthal man. But perhaps another gap is between those of us who live on our pensions and those who can spend £2,275 on a Louis Vuitton handbag. Are there any here tonight? I don't want to offend anyone.
I think 12,000 was realistic.
The technological development resulted from industrial capitalism, as I said. And it was at the profound human cost. But it helped us to get to where we are and make our vision a possibility. In a leaderless, democratic, controlled society, and it will be leaderless, and save us, please, from revolutionary elitist vanguards, no matter how conscientiously, how established, how successful the functioning of a regulatory mechanism, democracy, even in such a society, and it will be a democratic society, could not function as a mechanism that stands alone. It requires the active, informed participation, the unhampered and comprehensive dissemination of information, the absolute right to express uncoerced opinions, sensitive consideration for minority positions, and crucially, its very essence of principled, gracious conciliation pervading the interaction between those in the community. Unless democracy and the democratic spirit is reflected in our personal attitudes, thoroughly integrated into our lifestyle, philosophy or ethic, call it what you will, it will be unable to function effectively as an acceptable arbiter of social disputes without the resort to some overriding authority. The proper practice of democracy is never easy, and learning to get it right, or as right as possible, requires and will require time and practice. It is a deep learning experience for free and therefore potentially awkward individuals. But whatever its complexities, socialism and democracy are indivisible. So it's common ownership, production for use, true democracy, but no leaders. Sadly, the idea that Homo sapiens could coexist harmoniously without any kind of leaders or government, not to be confused with the essential administration of things, is also dismissed as almost impossible. And I was finished on this. I see I've got a few minutes. So many have had the confidence and self-belief seriously undermined by the authoritarian and exploitative system in which we live, that they seek security in conformity. A few make decisions and the rest are required to obey. Drawn into this comforting and dangerous illusion, the vast majority choose not to question the situation too strenuously. In their anxiety not to be seen as different or difficult, imbued with a genuine concern about losing their jobs, they substantially suppress the shared human capacity to be free, discriminating, sympathetic, cooperative, but dynamic human beings. Those who do not conform are quickly labelled cranks, troublemakers, rebels, freaks or fools, or in my case, a senile fool. Instead, they remain the generally nice, kind, malleable citizen, so beloved of politicians and leaders. The vast amounts of information directly affecting our lives, sometimes dramatically so, is kept secret because our leaders think they know best. I've got to finish in a few moments, but I want to tell you this little story, another true story, about the way in which some people give absolute unquestioning devotion to their leaders, even in this day and age. A few elections ago, when I was working in Lewisham, I went across to the Labour Party office. And there I saw the Labour Party woman worker, activist. And when I pointed out one or two of their broken promises and a few of their double dealings, she said, "Ah, yeah, that's what they all say, but that was before. Now," she said, "now we've got Tony Blair." All that was before. Now we've got Tony Blair. Oh, right, so I said, what does he believe then? Ah, well, that's what I'm waiting to find out. But we have got one member, one vote. And those of us with long memories doubtless recall the Machiavellian reasons for that particular decision. And here's a clue. It was not in the interests of Labour Party democracy. Anyway, I've got to shut up now. I've got a few more things to say, but I won't. All I will say to end is that human beings possess amazing potential, and it can only truly be reached by embracing the stunning, exciting principle of common ownership and an ungoverned society of free, independent, cooperative inhabitants. And that is what socialists stand for.
Okay, just to remind you of the running order, Dr. Butler is now going to take 10 or so minutes to respond, and then Richard will take a further 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Richard, I respect you very much, but I have to say I was slightly disappointed there, because I think much of what you were saying was a caricature of the reality and indeed of my own position. And I think that you were falling into the error which I said at the beginning I hoped we wouldn't fall into. Sorry, am I not talking loud enough? Just say it wrong. Which I hope we wouldn't fall into, of comparing our own bright theory with the other person's reality. And I feel that you were doing that. We were having we found a lot of upbeat talk about the socialist society which you had in mind and how liberating and that will be, compared to, well, the Duke of Westminster is not right now. The Duke of Westminster is lost in history, and there's ages of law and all the rest of it, which contributes to that man being so fabulously wealthy, in my judgment, rather unjustly. So you can't do that. You can't compare a theory on one side and practice on the other. I'm very willing to argue either, but you can't argue one against the other. But you made so many points, I don't know how many I can get through in 10 minutes. I counted about 15 or 16 different points there. Some of them I would like to address. I mean, you started by saying that the capitalist system you felt was oppressive. Now, in some ways, people say that, and they think they're big businesses and they control everything and all the rest of it. The opposite is true, or certainly the opposite ought to be true if we have a proper capitalist system which is based on open competition. Because in a competitive environment, what gets produced is what people want. It is what the customers want. If you produce something and nobody wants to buy it, well, you haven't made a profit. So forget about the profit motive. You failed. Consumers are sovereign. Now, in the real world, yeah, you're absolutely right. I see that. Yes, I know what you're saying. In the real world, of course, you mentioned banking. The consumers definitely aren't sovereign. And why is that? Because there's so much bloody regulation on banks. They're regulated to within an inch of their lives. They're regulated as to how long they can let the phone ring before they can pick it up. Literally. And regulation is expensive. And that means that new entrants can't come into that market. It's very difficult to open up a new bank. It costs you something like, some banker was telling me 30 million quid to get a banking license in this country, because that's all the amount of hoops that you've got to go through. And then you've got to have all your compliance people to make sure that you tick all the boxes. Which means that, of course, you don't get enough competition. You don't get enough new people coming in with new ideas and new ways of doing things, better ways of doing things, so that customers have a real choice. And in the banking crisis just recently, the government merged banks, forced banks to merge, so we've got even fewer banks. We need more. and we need more of many other industries as well. One can think of utilities and so on. There isn't enough competition in them. And if you have a market as I envisage, then you would have much more competition, and consumers would genuinely be sovereign, because if they didn't like what they're getting from one supplier, they can go to another. And the first supplier will go bust, and the second supplier will pick up those jobs and that profit, and that will steer resources to where people actually want them to go. So I don't think it's an oppressive system, at least I don't think it should be an oppressive system. I can see that, if you're talking reality, I can talk reality of your system, but if you're talking reality, yes, we've got a long way to go before we produce, my ideal of a capitalist system, which would be very open and competitive. I'm very worried about the idea, your second sort of point, about common ownership, because I think this is, again, I do think it's a pipe dream. I think that people husband their own resources. If you own something, you look after it. If you are just part of a big collective, well, maybe you don't. One thinks of the collective farms and all the rest of it, absolute failure. And even there was some American friend of mine who was telling me, why do Americans celebrate Thanksgiving every November? Pilgrims went to America, and they did indeed practice communal ownership. And they had 2 extremely bad harvests, and then they thought, right, well, every man for himself. So people did actually plant and reap the success of their hard work and energy. And then they had a monster harvest, and so they shared it with the Indians, and it was absolutely great, and they've done it ever since. People will look after their own resources and protect them, and that's exactly what you want to do. You want people building up capital so that it makes goods and services more cheaply and more effectively at a better standard. And I think you can say, oh, right, well, back in the Stone Age, people used to share and there was no problem about it, and they want to do it now. Well, it's capitalism. You're looking back at a different society. The fact is that we have a world of billions of people. You can easily work out a sharing system within a small group, and everybody knows what they're doing and what their role is, and they share resources and all the rest of it. But it has to be a small group. They always say, Jesus had 12 disciples, and that proved to be one too many. Because once you get larger, you don't know each other. And group this big, we don't really know each other. We don't, can you trust people if people are cheating? Well, you can't just say, oh, maybe they'll cheat in a socialist paradise. People will cheat.
How? Tell us how.
Well, I'm saying, if collecting resources for themselves, secretly perhaps, I don't know. But you're faced with that problem. The larger the society is, then the less you know of people. And that's the magic of the market economy, is that, look, what am I wearing? I don't know, I'm wearing shoes of leather, probably come from Argentina. I'm wearing socks made of cotton that might come from Egypt. I don't know people in Egypt, I don't know people in Argentina, and yet the system gets those resources to me. It's a massive global cooperation system. It just happens to be done through the medium of exchange of money and through profit and through interpersonal exchange. I don't want to go into things like, oh well, capitalist system leaves flats boarded up and supermarket wasting food. That just, that isn't true, because what is the problem there is things like planning laws. It is the democratic systems which is corrupt and creeping in most countries which produce those kind of things. No property owner can afford, in a properly competitive environment, to leave it idle and unused. The whole point is that in a competitive world, you have to use resources more efficiently, because if you don't, somebody else will come up and use other resources more efficiently, and we'll get the trade that we want. And I look at, on another point you made, you're talking about capitalism being grasping and all the rest of it. Fine, but at the same time, look at the volume of philanthropy which comes out of capitalist societies. Bill Gates is putting out, Bill saying how many millions or billions, I don't know how much it is, to do things like rid the world of malaria, which is one of the most useful things you can do. You're talking about stress, but people are actually dying in their millions or incapacitated in their millions, so that they can't work in Africa and other countries. And here you have philanthropy is going to solve that problem. And the wealth that you get from the capitalist system is where you get the resource to do that. So, and again, you talk about production for use and not for profit. Well, as Adam Smith said, the whole point of production is consumption. That people only produce things to be consumed. And it is because people want to consume goods and services that other people produce them. So, I think that's a caricature of the system. So much more, I don't know quite where to start and stop. One of the things which I do think I would like to raise an objection to is this idea that, well, capitalism is inefficient because it's spent so much time on marketing, and you've got all these salespeople, and in a socialist society you wouldn't need that, there'd be far fewer range of goods, you wouldn't have to try and sell your one and all the rest of it. We make progress by differentiation. We make progress by different people doing different things, and then we decide, well, which of these do we think is better? You've got stuck in this this idea of a perfect market, that the perfect market where there's a graph goes that way, and a graph goes that way, and then there's a price and a quantity. And the assumption behind that is that all goods and services are the same. All buyers and sellers are the same. Everything is uniform. The exact opposite is true in the market. You go into a market anywhere here, like selling fruit or whatever, and there'll be different stalls, and different people will have slightly different offerings. And the bananas might be greener or blacker, and the strawberries might be bigger or smaller, and the mangoes, and people are actually giving you very different products, and you decide between them. You say, well, these apples look much better than the chap down there, and I'll buy those. And that's how we make progress, because it's an evolutionary system, that people are always coming up with new ideas and new ways of doing things, and then people can decide between them, and they decide what they think is best, and then people produce more of that. And then there are little gradations in that one, people produce more of that. And that's how you make progress. You don't make progress by trying to make everything uniform, and I think that's the mistake there, that capitalism isn't actually inefficient. It's not inefficient to have a wide variety, 101 different kinds of car, or typewriter, or mobile phone, or whatever. It's extremely efficient because you learn and you progress from that. And I've said about banks being uncompetitive. I've told you why that is. Money. I don't get hung up with money. Money is just a medium of exchange. We do exchange things. It is natural that we should exchange things. And we can't all, if you've got a hungry barber, that person can't always find a baker who needs a haircut. So what you do is you exchange something else, you exchange cash, which is no use for anything much, except as a medium of exchange. And that means that later on you can take that medium of exchange and get your haircut, or buy your bread. That's what it is. It is just another good. There's nothing special or magical about it. There's nothing to be feared about it. All it is, it's something like glass, except it's something which everybody will take. The point about money is that everybody accepts it in exchange. So it's a medium of exchange. It doesn't do anything itself. What is this? Well, I just want to say, you know, I have the same vision actually that you do. And I think, you know, I would like to see a world in which there are indeed competitive markets where people can enter markets and exit from markets, and that there is